Groom took the bride's name. It's extraordinary. Unheard of until recently. And then he made a covenant with Israel. And he says, I married you at Sinai. You're my wife. And therefore he took the name Israel, and God will forever be called the Holy One of Israel. Amazing. And when Israel broke that covenant, what did God say? I was talking just yesterday, was it, or the day before, about the prophet Hosea. And God said to the prophet Hosea, go out and find a prostitute. But I'm a preacher, Lord. Go and find a prostitute and marry her. Oh, he said, I can't do that. He said, think of the headlines. Prostitute marries preacher, or preacher marries prostitute. And what then? Well, then you must have some children. But God said, I better warn you, not all the children will be yours. And what then, Lord? Well, then she's going to go back on the streets, back to her old trade. What do I do then with the 3 kids? Well, then, Hosea, I want you to go and find her, pay the pimp who's running her, and bring her back home, put her in under discipline for a time, and then take her back for your wife. And why do I have to do all that, Lord? Because that's what Israel is doing to me, and that's how I feel about her. And you won't be able to convey my feelings to Israel unless you go through them yourself. So that's why. What an incredible story. You can read all about it in the book of Hosea. So God married people. He entered into a covenant marriage with Israel, with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He made his testament in their favor, made his will in their favor. One of the things he gave to them and left to them was the land in the Middle East, which we call the Promised Land. And all that was involved in what we call covenants. So God is a God who makes covenants. And the second thing I want to say is that God is a God who keeps covenants. If God ever makes a promise, he will never break it. And you will find 2 words all the way through the Bible. The words are, I will. And they're on God's lips almost every time. I will. I will. That's his will and testament, his promises to people. Do you know, I once had a thought, and I got a sheet of paper, and I wrote at the top, the things Almighty God cannot do. And very quickly I had a list of 30 things that Almighty God himself cannot do. I remember it began with, he cannot break a promise. He cannot tell a lie. He cannot tell a dirty joke. And I went on writing these things down until I'd got 31 things on the paper. I made it into a sermon, actually, the things God cannot do. And then when I looked at the list, having completed the paper, I thought, I've done all those things. But that didn't make me feel bigger than God. It made me feel very small, that I can do all those things that God can't. That's because of God's character. There are things that are so distasteful, so disgusting to him, such an abomination of desolation to him, that he just cannot bring himself to do them. We need to understand what God is like. Whether we believe in God isn't really important. It's what kind of God we do or don't believe in that really matters. For some years, I was a chaplain in the British Royal Air Force. And I was a chaplain of what are called the ODs, the other denominations. Now, when men arrived at the Air Force station, they had to report to the chaplains. And there were 3 of us on every station: a Roman Catholic, a Church of England, and then the other denominations. That was me, known as odd or oddbods. And so what happened was, maybe a couple of hundred new recruits would arrive at the station. The Church of England always demanded first go, because he was part of the established church of our country. So he said, everybody who's been christened as a baby in the Church of England, come with me. And he usually got about 3/4 of them. Then the Roman Catholic had another go, and he said, everybody from Ireland, come with me. And off he went with about another 10%. I got everything that was left. Presbyterians, Methodists, Baptists, Salvation Army, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, agnostics, and atheists. So I was left with such a muddle, and I had to look after all of them. I really enjoyed being a chaplain to atheists, because an atheist would arrive, and on his arrival card, under the heading religion, would be atheist. And I would welcome him warmly and say, congratulations on your faith. You must have more faith than I have. To believe that all this happened by chance and came about without any help from anyone. I just don't have enough faith to believe that. I said, I have to believe somebody had a hand in it. Much simpler, but you must be a person of great faith. Congratulations. Then the second thing I said to them was, while you're here, if you are killed, and many of our pilots were being killed then, if you're killed, I will have to bury you. And I said, I want to make you a solemn promise that I will not read from the Bible, that I will not say a prayer, that I will not sing a hymn, that I will not mention God. I will simply say, this man is dead and gone. And you know, I found that there were a lot of people who are quite happy to live as atheists, but they're not so happy to die as one. There's a kind of element of risk in that. And they didn't seem very happy about my proposal for their funeral. But the third thing I said to them was, now sit down there and tell me what kind of God you don't believe in. And after he'd finished, I could always say, well, you've just made me an atheist, because I don't believe in that kind of God either. Always ask what kind of God people believe in. And I believe in a God who is righteous. That means there are many, many things he cannot ever do. It doesn't make him helpless, but it makes him a wonderful God to know. It means, first, a righteous God, that God cannot do anything wrong, cannot do anything unfair, cannot do anything unjust. He cannot do anything wrong. To know that the God in charge of the universe is like that is a tremendous comfort. It also means that everything he does is right. That doesn't mean that everything that happens is right, but everything that he does, everything for which he is responsible, is absolutely right. As a pastor, one of the acute situations I had to deal with was where young parents had lost a baby. It's always a shock and a sad business when young parents, especially if it's the first baby, lose their baby.